The dust from the grave still clung to Norah Kendrick's black mourning dress when she first saw him standing at the edge of Boot Hill Cemetery, his silhouette cutting sharp against the Oklahoma sun like something carved from the very earth itself. She had just finished patting down the last shovelful of red clay over William's coffin, her hands raw and blistered because she refused to let anyone else do it. And when she looked up, there he was, watching her with eyes the color of aged whiskey. Enid, Oklahoma in the spring of 1893, was nothing but a collection of weathered buildings thrown up during the land run 4 years prior, a place where dreams came to either take root or die trying. Norah had arrived 3 days ago on the train from Missouri, carrying nothing but a carpetbag, her husband's body in a pine box, and a heart so thoroughly emptied of feeling that she wondered if she would ever care about anything again. William had been dead 2 weeks before she even knew about it. The telegram arrived at her sister's house in Kansas City, where she had been staying, trying to decide if she had the courage to leave her marriage for good. The words were brief and factual. "Your husband killed in accident. Stop, please come stop. Buried in Enid. Stop." No apology, no explanation, just those stark words that somehow made the decision for her. She did not cry when she read it. She had used up all her tears years ago, somewhere between the 3rd time William hit her and the night he gambled away the money for their passage to California. But duty was duty, even to a dead man who had never shown her a moment of genuine kindness in their 5 years of marriage. So she took the train south and west, watching the green hills give way to prairie, and felt nothing at all. The man at the cemetery's edge did not move as she gathered her few things, but she felt his gaze on her like a physical weight. When she finally walked past him toward the town, he tipped his hat, a gesture so old-fashioned and courteous that it caught her off guard. "Madam," he said, his voice low and rough like gravel rolling in a creek bed. "My condolences." Norah stopped, turned to look at him properly. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face that had seen its share of weather and hardship. His clothes were working man's attire, denim and leather, but clean and well-maintained. There was something in his expression that was not pity, which she appreciated, but rather a kind of understanding that made her uncomfortable. "Thank you," she said, because manners were automatic even when everything else felt hollow. "Vincent Zeller," he said, and did not offer his hand, seeming to understand that she was not ready to be touched by anyone. "I worked with your husband at the lumber mill." The name meant nothing to her. William had rarely spoken about his work in his infrequent letters, and never about the people he knew. "Did you know him well?" Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well enough to know he did not deserve a wife who would travel this far to bury him proper." The bluntness of it should have offended her, but instead, Norah felt something crack in the careful walls she had built around herself. This stranger saw what no one else seemed to see, that her presence here was obligation, not love, and he was not going to pretend otherwise. "I should get to the boarding house," she said, not knowing how to respond to such honesty. "Mrs. Fletcher's place?" "Yes." "I will walk with you. It is not far, but there are some rough characters in town on account of the payroll coming through." Norah wanted to refuse, to maintain the isolation that felt safer than any human connection. But she was tired and strange to this place, so she nodded. They walked in silence down the wide dirt street that served as Enid's main thoroughfare, past the general store and the bank, and the saloon already doing brisk business despite the early hour. "How did he die?" Norah asked finally, because no one had given her details and she supposed she should know. Vincent was quiet for a moment, as if weighing how much truth to tell. "A load of lumber fell, crushed him quick. He did not suffer." Was he drinking? Another pause. Yes, madam, of course he was. William was always drinking. It was one of the few consistent things about him. Were you there when it happened? I was. I tried to warn him the load was not stable, but he was not in a listening mood. Which meant he had been drunk enough to be belligerent, drunk enough to ignore common sense, drunk enough to get himself killed through his own stubbornness. Norah felt a wave of anger so fierce it surprised her. Anger at William for dying stupidly. Anger at herself for caring even that much. Anger at this stranger for witnessing her husband's final moments of foolishness. Here we are, Vincent said, stopping in front of a two-story house that had once been painted white but had faded to the color of old bones. Mrs. Fletcher is a good woman. She will treat you fair. Thank you for walking with me. He tipped his hat again. If you need anything while you are in town, I am usually at the mill or at the livery. My horse is boarding there and I help out some in exchange. I will only be here a few days, just long enough to settle his affairs if he had any. Vincent's eyes met hers, and she saw something in them that might have been disappointment. That is a shame. Before she could ask what he meant, he turned and walked away, his long stride carrying him quickly back toward the main street. Norah watched him go, feeling oddly bereft, then shook herself and climbed the steps to knock on Mrs. Fletcher's door. The boarding house was clean and quiet, smelling of lye soap and beeswax. Mrs. Fletcher was a widow herself, a sturdy woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She showed Norah to a small room on the second floor with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the backyard where chickens scratched in the dirt. I am sorry for your loss, dear, Mrs. Fletcher said. Your husband paid through the end of the month for his room, so you are welcome to stay that long if you need. That is generous, but I expect I will leave sooner. Where will you go? It was a simple question, but Norah realized she had no answer. Back to Kansas City, she supposed, back to being a burden on her sister's hospitality. There was no money, no property, nothing tying her anywhere. She was 26 years old and utterly unmoored from any life that made sense. I have family in Missouri, she said vaguely, Mrs. Fletcher nodded, but her expression suggested she understood more than Norah said. Well, you rest now. Supper is at 6 if you want to come down, or I can bring you a tray. Thank you. Alone in the room, Norah sat on the bed and looked at her hands. The blisters from the shovel had broken and bled, staining her gloves. She peeled them off carefully and saw that her palms were a mess of raw skin and dirt. She should wash them, should tend to them, but instead she just sat there, staring at the evidence of the last real thing she had done. She had buried her husband, the man who had courted her with pretty words and promises, who had seemed so dashing and exciting compared to the safe, boring boys she knew in her hometown. The man who turned mean when he drank, which was often, and careless with money, and eventually careless with her. The man who left her alone for months at a time while he chased opportunities that never panned out, until finally he stopped sending for her at all. And now he was in the ground and she was free, and freedom felt like falling. That night she did not go down for supper. She washed her hands in the basin, wrapped them in strips torn from a spare petticoat, and lay on the bed fully clothed, watching the light fade from the window. Sleep came eventually, heavy and dreamless, and when she woke, it was to bright morning sun and the sound of hammering somewhere nearby. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur. She went to the bank and discovered William had $17 to his name. She went to the mill and was given his final pay, another $12. She went to the general store where he had a tab and paid off the $3 he owed. She went to the saloon and paid off considerably more. Everyone was very kind and very careful with her, treating her like something fragile that might shatter. She hated it. She hated the pitying looks and the gentle voices and the way people acted as if her life had ended along with William's, when the truth was her life might finally be beginning. She saw Vincent twice during those days. Once at the mill when she collected William's pay, where he was working shirtless in the sun, his skin bronzed and gleaming with sweat as he hauled timber. He saw her and nodded but did not approach, which she told herself was a relief. The second time was at the general store where they nearly collided in the doorway. "Mrs. Kendrick," he said, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. His touch was warm through the fabric of her sleeve, and she pulled away more sharply than she intended. "Mr. Zeller, how are you managing?" "Well enough." She could see a package of supplies in his arms, coffee and flour and beans. "I did not know mill workers shopped at Clark's. I thought the prices were too dear." Something flickered in his expression. "I do some work on the side, breaking horses mostly, pays better than lumber." "I see." They stood there awkwardly, neither quite willing to end the conversation but neither knowing how to continue it. Finally, Vincent shifted his package and said, "Have you given thought to staying in Enid?" "Why would I stay?" "Because sometimes a new place is easier than going back to an old one." The words hit closer to truth than Norah wanted to admit. "I have nothing here." "You have nothing anywhere from what I understand. At least here, no one knows your story. You could be anyone." It was too bold, too presumptuous, and Norah felt her spine stiffen. "You know nothing about me or my circumstances. I know your husband was a drunk and a fool. I know he left you alone in Kansas City for 8 months with no support. I know you flinched when I touched your arm just now, which tells me he was not kind to you. I know you deserve better than what you had, and I know Enid might not be much, but it is a place where you could start over." Norah stared at him, fury and something else warring in her chest. "How dare you? How dare you speak to me like you have any right to opinions about my life? You are correct. I apologize." But he did not look apologetic. He looked determined. "There is a teaching position opening up at the schoolhouse. Miss Grady is getting married and moving to Texas. The pay is not much, but it is steady and it comes with a small house. You are educated. I can tell by the way you speak and carry yourself. You could do it. I am not a teacher, but you could be." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and walked past her into the store, leaving her standing on the wooden sidewalk with her heart pounding and her thoughts in chaos. The audacity of the man speaking to her like that, making assumptions about her life, suggesting she append everything based on a conversation with a near stranger. And yet that night, lying in her narrow bed at Mrs. Fletcher's, she could not stop thinking about it. A teaching position. A house. A life that was entirely her own, with no husband to answer to and no family to judge her choices. It was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. The next morning, she went to see the school. It was a simple building on the edge of town. Whitewashed wood with a bell tower and rows of windows that would let in good light. The current teacher, Miss Grady, was a cheerful young woman with rosy cheeks and a wedding ring already on her finger despite the ceremony being 2 weeks away. "Oh, Mrs. Kendrick, I am so glad you came," she said when Norah introduced herself. "Mr. Zeller mentioned you might be interested in the position." Of course he had. Norah did not know whether to be annoyed or impressed by his meddling. "I have no formal training." "Neither did I when I started. Can you read and write and cipher?" "Yes." "Can you keep order among 24 children ranging from 6 to 14? "I believe so." "Then you are qualified. The school board is meeting tomorrow evening. If you are serious, you should attend and present yourself. They are desperate to fill the position before the fall term." Norah looked around the schoolroom, at the neat rows of desks, and the slate board on the wall and the bookshelf in the corner. She tried to imagine herself here, day after day, teaching children their letters and numbers, shaping young minds. It seemed impossible, and yet no more impossible than anything else in her life. "I will think about it," she said. "Do not think too long. There is another candidate from Oklahoma City, but between you and me, the board would prefer someone local, or local enough." That evening, Norah made a list of reasons to leave Enid and reasons to stay. The leaving column was sparse. Return to family, safety of the familiar, escape from memories of William. The staying column grew longer as she wrote. Teaching position, independence, fresh start, small house. No one knowing her past, the chance to build something entirely her own. And underneath it all, unwritten but present, was Vincent Zeller's weathered face and understanding eyes. She attended the school board meeting the next evening, wearing her best dress and her most confident expression. There were 5 men on the board, ranging from the young banker to the elderly minister, and they asked her about her education and her experience with children and her religious affiliation. She answered honestly and carefully, and when they asked why she wanted to stay in Enid, she said, "Because I believe in second chances, and this town feels like the right place to take mine." They conferred briefly and offered her the position on the spot. The salary was $40 a month plus the use of the teacher's cottage. She would start in September when the fall term began, which gave her 4 months to prepare. Norah accepted, shook their hands, and walked out of the meeting hall into the warm May evening feeling as if she had just jumped off a cliff and did not yet know if she would fly or fall. Vincent was waiting outside, leaning against a post with his hat pushed back on his head. "You were very sure of yourself," Norah said, stopping in front of him. "Was I wrong? You had no business interfering in my life." "That is true. I apologize." "Stop apologizing when you do not mean it." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it from merely handsome to something that made her stomach flip. "Yes, madam. Why did you do it? Tell Miss Grady about me, I mean." Vincent was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching her face. "Because I saw you at that grave, putting your husband in the ground with your own hands, and I thought, here is a woman with steel in her spine. And then I saw how you held yourself, so careful and closed off, and I thought, here is a woman who has been hurt and is determined not to be hurt again. And I thought what a waste it would be for you to go back to whatever life you ran from when you could stay here and build something new." "You know nothing about me," Norah said, but her voice was softer now. "I know enough. I know you are brave and stubborn and stronger than you think you are. I know you deserve a chance to find out who you are when no one is telling you who you ought to be." Something in Norah's chest cracked open, some tight, painful thing she had been holding closed for years. "And what do you get out of this, Mr. Zeller? What is your interest in my staying?" "The truth, please. I would like the chance to know you, to see if the woman I think you might be is real or just wishful thinking on my part." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in years, maybe ever. Norah felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. "I am not ready for anything like that. I do not know if I will ever be ready. I am not asking you to be. I am just asking you to stay, to give yourself time to see what happens when you are not running from something but toward something. And if nothing happens, if I stay and I am still broken and empty and unable to feel anything." Vincent straightened, took a step closer. He did not touch her, but she could feel the warmth of him, the solid reality of his presence. "Then at least you will have a good job and a place to live and the satisfaction of knowing you tried. But I do not think that is what will happen." "What do you think will happen?" "I think you will heal. I think you will discover you are not half as broken as you believe. I think you will teach those children and make a home for yourself, and slowly, piece by piece, you will come back to life. You sound very certain. I am. He smiled again, and this time she let herself smile back just a little. I should go. Mrs. Fletcher will have supper waiting. May I walk you back? Norah considered refusing, but the evening was pleasant and she found she did not want to be alone just yet. All right. They walked slowly through the gathering dusk, past the shops closing up for the night and the saloon just beginning to fill with voices and piano music. Vincent told her about the town, about the people she would come to know, about the harsh winters and beautiful springs and the way the prairie looked when the wildflowers bloomed. You love it here, Norah observed. I do. I grew up in Chicago, working in my father's print shop. Everything was brick and smoke and crowds. When I came west 5 years ago, it was like I could breathe for the first time. All this space, all this sky, it gets in your blood. Why did you leave Chicago? Because my father wanted me to marry his business partner's daughter and take over the shop, and I wanted neither of those things. So I left, and I have not regretted it once. Does your family know where you are? I write to my mother twice a year. She writes back and tells me my father will forgive me if I come home, but we both know that is not true. He is the kind of man who sees any deviation from his plans as betrayal. Norah understood that kind of man. William had been similar in his way, though without the business success or social standing. Do you miss them? Sometimes. But I miss the idea of them more than the reality. The reality was stifling. They reached Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house too soon. Norah hesitated on the bottom step, not quite ready to go inside. Thank you for walking me home, she said. My pleasure. When do you take possession of the teacher's cottage? The end of the month when Miss Grady moves out. If you need help moving your things, I am available. I do not have things, plural, just a carpet bag. Then we should fix that. Vincent's eyes were warm in the lamplight spilling from the boarding house windows. You will need furniture and dishes and all the things that make a house a home. I know some people who might have items to spare, and I am handy with tools if we need to build anything. Mr. Zeller, you have already done too much, Vincent. And I have done exactly what I wanted to do. Let me help, Norah. Let someone help you for once. The use of her first name should have felt presumptuous, but instead it felt right, like slipping into a warm bath after a long cold day. All right, but I will pay you back somehow. Deal. Good night, Norah. Good night, Vincent. She went inside and climbed the stairs to her room, and for the first time since arriving in Enid, she felt something that might have been hope. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of activity that left Norah little time to dwell on the strangeness of her situation. Miss Grady invited her to observe at the school, and Norah spent her mornings learning the rhythms of the classroom, the way to capture children's attention and maintain order, the curriculum she would need to teach. The afternoons she spent with Vincent, visiting various homes around town to collect donated furniture and household goods for the cottage. Mrs. Patterson gave her a table and 4 chairs. The minister's wife contributed a set of dishes and some linens. Old Mr. Hobson had a bookshelf in his barn that just needed some sanding and a fresh coat of paint. Piece by piece, the cottage began to take shape, transformed from an empty shell into something that resembled a home. Vincent was there for all of it, hauling furniture and repairing broken hinges and painting walls. He was patient and skilled with his hands, and he made her laugh with dry observations about the townspeople and stories from his cowboy work breaking horses. Norah found herself looking forward to the time they spent together, found herself relaxing in his presence in a way she never had with William. Tell me about growing up in Missouri, Vincent said one afternoon as they painted the cottage's kitchen a cheerful yellow. There is not much to tell. Small town, big family. I was the middle daughter of 5 children. My father ran the feed store. My mother kept house and made sure we all minded our manners. How did you meet William? It was the first time either of them had directly mentioned her late husband since that initial conversation, and Norah felt herself tense. But Vincent's tone was casual, and his focus was on the wall he was painting, giving her space to answer or not. He came through town as a salesman. Drummers, they called them. He sold farming equipment, and he was charming and well-dressed, and he paid me attention. I was 20 and foolish, and I thought he was sophisticated. When did you marry? 3 months after we met. My parents tried to talk me out of it, but I thought they were just being overprotective. I thought I knew better. She laughed bitterly. I learned quickly that I did not. What happened? Norah set down her paintbrush and looked at her hands. The blisters had healed, leaving faint scars across her palms. He drank. He gambled. He could not hold a job for more than a few months before he would lose his temper or not show up or get himself fired for some foolishness. We moved constantly, always chasing the next opportunity. And when things went wrong, which they always did, he would blame me. Did he hit you? The question was quiet, almost gentle, but it landed like a stone in still water. Norah had never told anyone the truth, had hidden the bruises and made excuses and pretended everything was fine. But something about Vincent, about the way he asked without judgment, made her want to be honest. Sometimes. Not often, and never where it would show. He was careful about that. But yes, when he was drunk enough and angry enough, he would hit me. Vincent stopped painting. He set down his brush very carefully and turned to face her. I am sorry that happened to you. I am sorry he hurt you and made you feel small, and I am glad he is dead, because if he were not, I would be very tempted to kill him myself. The vehemence in his voice should have frightened her, but instead, Norah felt validated, seen in a way she never had been before. He was not always terrible. There were moments when he was the man I thought I married. They were just too few and far between. That almost makes it worse. If someone is cruel all the time, at least you know what to expect. But when they are kind just often enough to make you hope, that is a special kind of torture. Yes, the word came out as a whisper. That is exactly it. Vincent crossed the small kitchen and stood in front of her, close but not touching. You are safe now. You know that, right? You are safe and you are free, and no one will ever hurt you that way again. How can you promise that? Because I will make sure of it. Because this town will make sure of it. Because you are one of us now, and we take care of our own. Norah felt tears slip down her cheeks, the first she had cried since learning of William's death. Vincent pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her, and she pressed it to her face, breathing in the scent of sun-dried cotton and the faint smell of horses. I am sorry, she said. I do not usually fall apart like this. You are not falling apart. You are letting yourself feel something after years of holding everything inside. There is a difference. They stood there in the half-painted kitchen while Norah cried out years of fear and loneliness and suppressed rage. Vincent did not try to hold her or shush her or tell her everything would be fine. He just stood there, solid and present, letting her have her moment of breaking. When the tears finally subsided, Norah felt scraped raw but somehow lighter. She handed back the handkerchief and managed a watery smile. Thank you, anytime. Vincent's eyes were serious, intent. I mean that, Norah. Anytime you need to talk or cry or rage at the unfairness of it all, I am here. Why? Why are you being so kind to me? Because you deserve kindness. And because I have come to care about you quite a lot, and I want you to be happy. The confession hung in the air between them. Norah knew she should probably be alarmed, should pull back and establish boundaries, but she found she did not want to. The truth was she had come to care about Vincent too, had come to rely on his steady presence and easy humor, had begun to imagine what it might be like to trust someone again. I care about you too, she said softly, but I am not ready for anything more than friendship. Not yet. I know. And I am happy to be your friend for as long as you need. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people helping each other build a life in this strange, wonderful place. Deal. They shook hands solemnly, and then Vincent grinned and said, "Now, are we going to finish painting this kitchen or stand here being emotional all day?" Norah laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "We should probably finish the kitchen. Probably wise. Mrs. Fletcher is bringing supper at 6, and she will judge us if we have not finished." They painted in comfortable silence for the rest of the afternoon, and when Mrs. Fletcher arrived with a basket of fried chicken and biscuits, the kitchen was done and looking cheerful in its new yellow coat. The three of them ate on the front porch in the golden early evening light, and Norah thought that this, right here, felt like the beginning of something good. She moved into the cottage at the end of May, and suddenly she had a home of her own for the first time in her life. It was small and simple, just 3 rooms and an outhouse in back, but it was hers. No one could take it from her as long as she fulfilled her teaching duties. She could decorate it how she liked, could come and go as she pleased, could live according to her own rhythms and desires. Vincent helped her move in, which took all of 15 minutes given how few possessions she had. When everything was in place, he stood in the middle of her tiny parlor and said, "You need a garden." "I have never gardened." "Then it is time to learn. Every house needs a garden. Vegetables to eat, flowers to look at, something growing that reminds you life goes on." So they planted a garden, Vincent teaching her how to turn the soil and make rows and place the seeds at the right depth. They planted tomatoes and beans and squash, and along the fence, they planted sunflowers because Vincent said they reminded him of Kansas, where he had worked for a year on a cattle drive. "Tell me about the cattle drive," Norah said as they worked. "It was brutal and beautiful in equal measure. 3 months of pushing a herd from Texas to Kansas, sleeping on the ground, eating beans and hardtack, breathing dust all day long. But the sunsets were like nothing I had ever seen, and the stars at night were so thick you felt like you could reach up and grab them. And there was something about the work, the simplicity of it, that fed my soul." "Is that when you learned to break horses?" "Some. But mostly I learned from a man named Jack Whitaker who ran a ranch outside of Wichita. I worked for him for 2 years, and he taught me everything about horses. How to read them, how to gentle them instead of breaking their spirit, how to earn their trust. He was the best horseman I ever met." "Do you miss it?" "The ranching life." Vincent sat back on his heels, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Sometimes, but I like having a steady place to land. I like Enid and the people here, and lately I like being near you." The admission made Norah's heart skip, but she kept her focus on the seeds she was planting. "I like having you near too. That is good, because I intend to be around quite a lot. Someone needs to make sure you do not let these plants die from neglect. I will have you know I am very responsible." "Oh, I know. I have seen how you organize your school books and plan your lessons. Miss Grady says she has never seen anyone prepare so thoroughly. I want to do well. These children deserve a good teacher. They are lucky to have you." The garden went in over the course of a week, and by the time they finished, Norah's hands were dirty and her back ached, and she felt more alive than she had in years. She made lemonade, and they sat on her front porch, watching the sun set over the prairie, and Norah thought about how much her life had changed in just 1 month. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked. "About how strange it is that I came here to bury someone and ended up finding a life instead. Strange in a good way." "Yes, strange in a very good way." Vincent reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her palm. It was the first time he had initiated physical contact beyond helping her over rough ground or handing her tools, and Norah felt her breath catch. But it did not feel threatening or possessive. It felt like a question, an offer she was free to accept or decline. She let her hand rest in his, felt the warmth and strength of it, and thought that maybe, slowly, she was learning to trust again. Summer unfurled across Oklahoma like a hot golden blanket. Norah spent her days preparing for the school term, reading every book about teaching she could borrow, practicing her lessons on a very patient Vincent who let her explain arithmetic and grammar to him while they worked on various projects around the cottage. Vincent continued working at the mill and breaking horses on the side, but he spent most of his free time with Norah. They fell into an easy rhythm, meals shared on her porch or walks along the creek that ran through town, conversations that ranged from silly to serious and back again. He told her about his childhood in Chicago, his decision to come west, the various jobs he had held as he made his way across the country. She told him about her family, her dreams before she met William, the books she loved and the places she wanted to see someday. And slowly, carefully, they began to acknowledge the growing feelings between them. It started with small things. Vincent bringing her wildflowers he picked on his way to her cottage. Norah baking bread and giving him half the loaf, still warm from the oven. Their hands finding each other more often. A touch on the arm, fingers brushing as they passed tools back and forth, sitting close enough that their shoulders pressed together. Then one evening in late June, as they sat on her porch watching fireflies dance in the dusk, Vincent said, "I need to tell you something." Norah's stomach tightened. In her experience, nothing good ever followed those words. "All right. I am falling in love with you." "I might have already fallen. And I know you said you were not ready, and I respect that, but I also think you should know where I stand. I am not William. I will never hurt you or make you feel small or put my desires above your well-being. I want to be with you, but only if and when you are ready. And if you are never ready, if you only ever want to be friends, I can live with that. But I wanted you to know the truth." Norah sat very still, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from the vulnerability of caring about someone again. But a larger part of her, the part that had been slowly waking up over the past 2 months, wanted to lean into the feeling, to see where it might lead. "I am falling in love with you too," she said quietly. "It terrifies me." "Why?" "Because the last time I loved someone, it destroyed me, and I am only just starting to feel like myself again. What if I let myself love you and it all goes wrong? What if I am not capable of being what you need?" Vincent turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the fading light. "First, you did not love William. You loved the idea of him, the person you thought he was. That is different. Second, love is always a risk. There are no guarantees. But I think the risk of loving and possibly losing is better than never loving at all. And third, you are already everything I need. You do not have to change or be different or prove anything. You just have to be you." "How are you so certain?" "Because I see you, Norah. I see how hard you work and how kind you are, and how you try to make everything better for everyone around you. I see your strength and your vulnerability and your fierce determination to build a good life. And I want to be part of that life, in whatever way you will let me." Tears pricked Norah's eyes again, but this time they were not tears of sadness. "I want that too. I want you in my life. I want to see where this could go." Yes, but we have to go slow. I need time to learn how to be with someone without fear. We will go as slow as you need." "I am not going anywhere." Vincent leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her softly. His lips were warm and gentle, and he tasted like the peppermint he had been chewing. Norah felt something flutter to life in her chest, something bright and hopeful and terrifying. When they pulled apart, Vincent smiled. That was all right. That was more than all right. They sat together until full dark, holding hands and watching the stars come out one by one, and Norah thought that maybe, just maybe, she was going to be all right after all. The summer passed in a haze of happiness that Norah had never experienced before. She and Vincent courted properly, with walks and picnics and supervised visits, because even though she was a widow and technically free to do as she pleased, she was also the new schoolteacher and subject to the town's scrutiny. Vincent was unfailingly respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, content to spend hours just talking or working side by side in her garden. They kissed sometimes, sweet gentle kisses that made Norah's heart race without frightening her. Vincent never grabbed or demanded or took without asking. He always checked that she was comfortable, always stopped when she indicated she needed space. It was a revelation, this kind of physical affection that felt safe and mutual. The townspeople began to take notice of their courtship, and opinions were mixed. Some thought it was too soon after William's death, that Norah should observe a proper mourning period. Others thought Vincent was too rough for a schoolteacher, that she should set her sights higher. But most people were happy for them, recognizing that Norah deserved a chance at happiness, and that Vincent was a good man who would treat her right. Mrs. Fletcher was firmly in the latter camp. "That young man is head over heels for you," she said one afternoon when Norah stopped by for tea. "And you light up like a candle when he walks in a room, pay no mind to the gossips. You have mourned that husband long enough." "I feel guilty sometimes," Norah admitted. "I should feel sadder that William is gone." "Nonsense. You did your duty by him, more than he ever deserved. Now you get to live your own life." In late July, Vincent took Norah to the big social event of the summer, the Enid Independence Day celebration. There was a parade and speeches and competitions, and in the evening, a dance in the town hall. Norah wore a new dress, the first she had bought herself with her own money from the teaching position, a pretty blue cotton that made her eyes look bright. Vincent cleaned up well too, trading his work clothes for a suit that must have been from his Chicago days, and when he saw her, his face transformed with such obvious admiration that Norah felt beautiful for the first time in years. They danced together, Vincent's hand firm on her waist, moving easily through the waltzes and reels. He was a good dancer, surprisingly graceful for someone so tall, and Norah found herself laughing as he spun her around the floor. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked during a break between songs. "My mother insisted. She said a gentleman needed to know how to conduct himself in polite society. I hated the lessons at the time, but I am grateful for them now." "Why?" "Because it gives me an excuse to hold you close in public without scandalizing the town." Norah blushed and swatted his arm, but she was smiling. "You are incorrigible. I am in love. There is a difference." Later they walked home through the quiet streets, the sounds of the celebration fading behind them. Vincent walked her to her door and kissed her goodnight, a longer, deeper kiss that left Norah breathless and wanting more. "Stay," she said impulsively, then immediately regretted it. "I am sorry, I should not have said that." "Why not?" "Because I am the schoolteacher. I have to be above reproach. If anyone saw you here overnight, I would lose my position." "Then I will not stay overnight, but I could stay for a while if you want company." Norah knew she should send him home, should maintain propriety, but she did not want to be alone, did not want this perfect evening to end. Just for a while. They sat together on her small sofa, Vincent's arm around her shoulders, and talked about everything and nothing. Norah felt safe in a way she never had with William, felt like she could be herself without judgment or fear. When Vincent finally left close to midnight, slipping out into the darkness like a shadow, Norah lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. her heart full of feelings she was still learning to name. August arrived with scorching heat that turned the prairie grass brown and made the town feel sleepy and slow. Norah prepared her classroom for the coming term, arranging desks and writing lessons on the board and organizing her few precious books. Vincent helped her install shelves and hang maps, and Miss Grady stopped by to offer advice and encouragement. "The children will test you the first week," she warned. "They always do with a new teacher, but you stand firm and fair and they will come around. Most of them are good kids, just full of energy and mischief." "What about the difficult ones?" Tommy Patterson is the ringleader. He is 13 and thinks he is too old for school, but he is smart as a whip when he applies himself. Win him over and the rest will follow. The night before school started, Norah could not sleep. She lay awake running through her lessons, worrying about everything that could go wrong, wondering if she was truly capable of this job. Around midnight, there was a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Vincent standing on her porch, holding a lantern. "I saw your light on," he said. "Figured you could not sleep." "How did you know?" "Because I know you. You are scared and excited and convinced you are going to fail, even though you are probably the most prepared teacher this town has ever had." Norah let him in, and they sat at her kitchen table drinking tea while she voiced all her fears and doubts. Vincent listened patiently, then took her hands in his. "You are going to be wonderful. Those children are lucky to have someone who cares as much as you do, and no matter what happens tomorrow, I will be there when you get home, wanting to hear all about it." His confidence in her was steadying. Norah squeezed his hands and managed a smile. "Thank you for coming by. Anytime. Now try to get some sleep. You want to be sharp tomorrow." The first day of school was chaos and magic in equal measure. The children poured in like a noisy flood, ranging from tiny 6-year-olds clutching lunch pails to gangly teenagers trying to look bored. Norah introduced herself, laid out her expectations, and dove into the first lesson. Tommy Patterson tested her within the first hour, making a smart remark about women teachers. Norah fixed him with a level stare and said, "Mr. Patterson, if you have something to contribute to our discussion of geography, please stand and share it with the class. Otherwise, kindly keep your observations to yourself." The directness surprised him into silence, and the other children giggled. After that, Tommy was more circumspect in his troublemaking, though Norah could tell he was sizing her up, waiting to see if she would be consistent or if this was just first-day strictness. By the end of the day, Norah was exhausted but exhilarated. She had done it. She had managed 24 children of varying ages and abilities, had taught lessons and kept order, and only lost her temper once when 2 boys started fighting over a pencil. Vincent was waiting for her when she emerged from the schoolhouse, leaning against a fence post with a grin on his face. "How did it go?" "It was terrifying and wonderful, and I have no idea if I am doing anything right, but I loved it. I knew you would." He offered his arm and they walked together toward her cottage. "Tell me everything." So she did, describing each child and the lessons and the small victories and the moments of panic. Vincent listened attentively, asking questions and laughing at the funny parts, and by the time they reached her house, Norah felt lighter, as if sharing the experience had made it more manageable. The fall settled into a rhythm. School during the week, with evenings spent grading papers and planning lessons. Vincent stopped by most nights, sometimes to help with chores, sometimes just to sit with her on the porch and talk about their days. On Sundays, they went to church together and then spent the afternoon exploring the countryside around Enid, walking along the creek or riding horses Vincent borrowed from the livery. Norah discovered she was good at teaching. The children responded to her firm but kind approach, And even Tommy Patterson eventually became one of her best students, his natural intelligence finally engaged. She loved the challenge of reaching each child, figuring out what made them tick, helping them discover the joy of learning. And she loved coming home to Vincent, having someone to share her triumphs and frustrations with, someone who cared about the small details of her life. It was a kind of partnership she had never experienced with William, who had viewed her life as irrelevant to his own concerns. In October, Vincent's horse-breaking work took him out of town for a week, working with a rancher north of Enid who had a string of young Mustangs that needed gentling. Norah was surprised by how much she missed him, how empty her evenings felt without his presence. When he returned, sunburned and tired and smelling of horses, she threw her arms around him before she could think better of it. "I missed you," she said into his shoulder. "I missed you too." He held her close, his chin resting on top of her head. "It felt wrong being away from you." "Do you have to travel for work often?" "Sometimes. But only if you can manage without me." "I can manage, I just prefer not to." Vincent pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching her face. "Norah, I need to ask you something." Her heart skipped. "What?" "This thing between us, this courtship. Where do you see it going?" It was a fair question, one Norah had been avoiding thinking about too directly. They had been courting for 4 months now, long enough that people expected some kind of declaration of intent. "Where do you want it to go?" "I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. But I need to know if that is something you can imagine, or if I am hoping for something you cannot give." Norah's immediate reaction was panic. Marriage meant vulnerability, meant trusting someone completely, meant risking everything she had worked so hard to build. But as she looked at Vincent, at his honest face and patient eyes, she realized the bigger risk would be letting fear win. "I can imagine it," she said slowly. "It scares me, but I can imagine it. I can imagine being your wife, having a home with you, building a family. I can imagine trusting you with my heart." Relief washed over Vincent's features. "That is all I needed to hear. We do not have to rush anything. I just needed to know we are moving in the same direction." "We are. But Vincent, I need you to understand something. I cannot be that woman again, the one who made herself small to please a man. If we marry, I need to keep teaching. I need to have my own life and my own purpose. I would never ask you to give that up. I love that you are a teacher. I love watching you pour yourself into those children. I do not want to change you, Norah. I want to support you being fully yourself. Then yes, someday when we are both ready, I would like to marry you." Vincent kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise, and Norah felt the last pieces of her broken heart click back into place. They were married in December, a simple ceremony in the church with the whole town in attendance. Norah wore a green dress that brought out the color of her eyes, and Vincent wore his suit, and Mrs. Fletcher cried through the entire service. The minister who married them was the same one who had hired Norah for the teaching position, and he spoke about second chances and the grace of new beginnings, about how love could heal even the deepest wounds. Norah felt tears on her cheeks as she said her vows, promising to love and honor Vincent, knowing that this time she was choosing freely, with full knowledge of what she was doing. After the ceremony, there was a party at the town hall with food and music and dancing. Norah was passed from partner to partner as the men of Enid took turns spinning her around the floor, but she kept looking back to Vincent, who stood at the edge watching with such obvious pride and love that it made her breathless. Finally, as the evening wound down, they slipped away to the cottage that was now theirs together. Vincent had moved his few belongings in that morning, and seeing his things mixed with hers made Norah's heart swell. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked, pulling her close in the privacy of their home. Happier than I ever thought possible. No regrets, none. You. Only that I did not find you sooner. They kissed, and this time there was no need to pull away, no need to maintain propriety. This was their wedding night, and Norah was both nervous and eager, wanting to finally be fully intimate with this man she loved but afraid of the memories that might surface. Vincent seemed to sense her hesitation. We do not have to do anything you are not ready for. I want to. I just need you to be patient with me. Always. He was patient and gentle and attentive, taking his time, checking in with her constantly, making sure she felt safe and cared for. It was nothing like her experiences with William, which had been perfunctory at best and painful at worst. This was tender and mutual, an expression of love rather than an assertion of control. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her narrow bed, and Norah felt tears slip down her cheeks again. "Did I hurt you?" Vincent asked, alarmed. "No, the opposite. I just never knew it could be like that." Gentle and sweet and beautiful. Vincent kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "It will always be like that between us, I promise you." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and when Norah woke in the morning to find Vincent still beside her, his hair mussed and his face soft with sleep, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This was her husband, her partner, her home. The winter passed in a blur of domesticity and contentment. Norah continued teaching, and Vincent continued his work at the mill and with horses. They fell into easy rhythms, sharing chores and meals and conversation, learning each other's habits and preferences. They had their first fight in January, over something trivial Norah could not even remember later, and learned how to argue without cruelty and make up without resentment. In February, Norah realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complex mix of emotions: joy at the thought of a child with Vincent, fear that she would not be a good mother, worry about managing her teaching duties. She told Vincent one evening after supper, simply and directly, and watched his face transform with wonder. "We are going to have a baby. In September, I think." Vincent picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "We are going to be parents. I cannot believe it. Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it. Norah, you have given me everything I ever wanted. A home, a love, and now a family. I am the luckiest man alive." His enthusiasm was contagious, and Norah found her own fears fading in the face of his joy. They would figure it out together, just as they had figured out everything else. She told the school board about the pregnancy, and there was some discussion about whether she should continue teaching. Married women teachers were uncommon, and pregnant ones even more so. But Norah was adamant that she wanted to work as long as she was able, and the board, seeing how much the children had thrived under her care, agreed to let her continue through the spring term. The baby made itself known with morning sickness that lasted all day, and a bone-deep fatigue that left Norah falling asleep the moment she sat down. Vincent fussed over her constantly, bringing her ginger tea and making sure she rested, taking over more of the household chores so she could conserve her energy for teaching. By the time school let out for the summer in May, Norah was visibly pregnant and ready for a break. She spent the hot months resting and sewing baby clothes and preparing for the arrival of their child. Vincent built a cradle from oak, sanding it smooth and painting it white, and Mrs. Fletcher organized a whole parade of women who brought diapers and blankets and well-meaning advice. The baby came on a warm September evening, just as the sun was setting. The labor was long and painful, but Vincent stayed with her the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead and telling her how strong she was. When the midwife finally placed their son in her arms, Norah looked down at his red, wrinkled face and felt a love so fierce it was almost frightening. "He is perfect," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Now, holding their son, Norah knew exactly what felt right. Samuel, Samuel Vincent Zeller, Samuel. Vincent tested the name, then smiled. "I like it. Hello, Samuel. Welcome to the world." The baby thrived, growing fat and happy on his mother's milk. Norah had arranged for a neighbor woman to watch Samuel while she taught, and returning to work in October was harder than she anticipated. But she loved teaching, loved her students, and Samuel was well cared for, so she pushed through the guilt and exhaustion. Vincent was a natural father, patient and playful and completely besotted with his son. He would spend hours just holding Samuel, talking to him about horses and weather and the shape of clouds, nonsense that made Norah smile. Watching them together filled her with a contentment she had never thought possible. The years passed in a steady rhythm of work and family and love. Samuel was joined by a daughter, Rose, 2 years later, and then another son, Daniel, 2 years after that. The cottage grew crowded and Vincent built an addition, 2 more bedrooms and a proper parlor, so they had space for their growing family. Norah continued teaching, becoming a fixture in Enid, known for her firm but kind approach and her ability to reach even the most difficult students. Vincent's reputation as a horseman spread, and he began to get commissions from ranchers across the territory. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. The children grew up strong and healthy, each with their own personality. Samuel was serious and thoughtful, always watching the world with careful eyes. Rose was fierce and fearless, climbing trees and catching frogs and keeping her brothers in line. Daniel was the charmer, with Vincent's smile and a talent for getting into mischief. Norah loved them all with a ferocity that sometimes surprised her, loved the chaos and noise and constant demands of parenthood. This was the life she had dreamed of without knowing it, the family she had longed for in some deep, unacknowledged place. And through it all, there was Vincent, her constant companion and partner. They still made time for each other, stealing quiet moments on the porch after the children were asleep, holding hands and talking about their days. The passion between them had not faded but deepened, becoming something richer and more complex than the initial rush of new love. One evening in the summer of 1901, 8 years after Norah first arrived in Enid, they sat on their porch watching the children play in the yard. Samuel was 10 now, teaching his younger siblings how to whistle with blades of grass. Rose was 8, already tall and gangly, all elbows and knees. Daniel was 6, following his older brother with worshipful eyes. "Do you ever think about what your life might have been like if you had never come to Enid?" Vincent asked. Norah considered the question. "Sometimes, but I cannot imagine it, really. This life, this family, it feels inevitable somehow, like it was always meant to be this way. Even though you had to lose so much to get here, even then. I would not wish those years with William on anyone, but they led me here. They made me who I am, and who I am is happy." Vincent kissed her temple, a gesture so familiar and comfortable that Norah barely registered it consciously. "I am glad you came to bury your husband. I am glad you stayed. I am glad you let me love you. I am glad, too, for all of it, the hard parts and the beautiful parts and everything in between." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the prairie, turning the sky into streaks of gold and pink and purple. The children's laughter carried on the evening breeze, and somewhere down the street, someone was playing a fiddle. It was an ordinary moment, nothing special or remarkable, but Norah knew she would remember it always, this perfect snapshot of the life she had built from the ashes of her old one. Samuel came running up to the porch, his face flushed with exertion. "Mama, can we have lemonade?" "Of course." "Why do not you go get the pitcher from the ice box?" He ran off, and Rose and Daniel followed, all three of them racing to be first to the kitchen. Norah heard the screen door slam and could not even bring herself to scold them for it. "You are a good mother," Vincent said. "I try. Some days I feel like I have no idea what I am doing." "That is every parent, but you love them and you show up for them and you teach them to be good people. That is what matters. Did you ever imagine we would have this, when you first saw me at that cemetery?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "I imagined something. I saw you standing there, so alone and so determined, and I thought if I could just get you to stay, if I could just show you there was another way to live, maybe you would find happiness. I hoped you might find it with me, but mostly I just wanted you to be all right. You did more than make me all right. You taught me how to live again. You taught my heart to open up and feel and trust. I came here broken, and you helped me put myself back together. You did the work yourself. I just stood by and believed in you." The children came back out with glasses of lemonade, chattering about their games and plans. They settled on the porch steps, and Vincent told them a story about a wild Mustang he was working with, making it dramatic and funny, and the children hung on every word. Norah watched her family and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it brought tears to her eyes. She had traveled to Enid, Oklahoma, 8 years ago to bury a husband who had never loved her properly, had come to this dusty prairie town expecting nothing but a grave to mark the end of a failed chapter. Instead, she had found a home and a purpose, and a love that remade her from the inside out. She had found Vincent, patient and kind and steady as the earth itself. She had found teaching, which fed her soul in ways she never anticipated. She had found community and belonging and the simple, profound joy of a life well lived. And she had found herself, the woman she was always meant to be, strong and capable and worthy of love. As the evening deepened into night, and the children finally wore themselves out, Norah and Vincent put them to bed, a process that involved multiple drinks of water and stories and tucking in. When the house was finally quiet, they returned to the porch, to their favorite spot overlooking the prairie. "Do you ever regret staying?" Vincent asked. "Do you ever wonder what might have been if you had gone back to Missouri?" "Never. This is where I belong. You are where I belong." He kissed her then, slow and sweet, and Norah felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt that first time, 8 years ago, when she was just beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved happiness. "I love you," she said against his lips. "I love you too. Today, tomorrow, always." They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, thick and bright in the Oklahoma sky. The same stars that had witnessed her arrival as a grieving widow, and now looked down on her life as a wife, mother, teacher, and woman who had found her way home. Norah Kendrick Zeller had come to Enid to bury her husband. Instead, she had buried her old life, her fears, her belief that she was unworthy of love. And in their place, she had built something beautiful and lasting, a love story written in ordinary moments and extraordinary grace, a life that proved it was never too late to begin again. The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the scent of growing things and distant rain. Vincent's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. And Norah smiled, content in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the person she was meant to love, living exactly the life she was meant to live. It had taken loss and pain and tremendous courage to get here, but every step had been worth it. Every tear shed, every fear faced, every moment of doubt overcome had led her to this porch, this man, this family, this beautiful, imperfect, perfectly complete life. She came to bury her husband, and in the dirt of that Oklahoma grave, she planted the seeds of her own resurrection. Vincent had helped them grow, had tended them with patience and love, but the blooming was hers alone. And what a blooming it had been, wild and unexpected and more lovely than anything she could have imagined. As they finally went inside for the night, Norah paused at the threshold and looked back at the prairie stretching out into darkness. Somewhere out there, under this same sky, was the woman she used to be, small and scared and certain she would never be happy. Norah wished she could go back and tell that woman it would be all right, that heartbreak was not the end of the story but the beginning of a new chapter. But that woman was gone now, transformed by time and love and her own fierce determination into someone new, someone stronger, someone capable of joy. Norah Zeller closed the door on the night and turned to find Vincent waiting for her, his hand outstretched, his eyes warm with the love that had saved her life in every way that mattered. She took his hand and let him lead her home, into the house they had built together, into the life they were still creating day by day, into the future that stretched out before them bright with promise and possibility. She had come to bury her husband. Instead, she had found her heart, her home, and the great love of her life. And in the end, that made all the difference.